I'm Alistair Grell, a civil engineer, also a consultant in infrastructural development. It has always been very important to me for others, particularly people who come to us as clients who we serve, to understand the needs of the industry. Because at the end of the day, successful projects are successful because they have the proper spirit in terms of the advice we give as professionals, and also in terms of the clarity with which clients come to us in understanding what their goals and objectives are. And we believe that bringing to you industry professionals who are at the best of their trade to share information with you, and we feel will all go well to elevate the standard of our industry. And this is what we hope to bring to you through this Insite videocast, and we hope you'll find it informative, we hope you'll find it educational. We hope in some way it will give you something that you can use in your home improvement projects, in your renovation of your home, in your building of your new home, in your new commercial project, anything that you do which has an infrastructural development spin to it.
Insite is sponsored by
I really need to build my house, you know. I have hire purchase and credit card payments, education and the car loans, and plus rent. It's time. I'm ready.
Well, hello.
Who are you?
It doesn't matter who I am. You're ready to build your house.
But how? Didn't you hear all the monthly payments I have? You know what? Let me just imagine that house, because I cannot afford that.
Yes, you can with the National Cooperative Credit Union Limited Mortgage Blast 2.0. Give us your credit card payments. Give us your hire purchase payments. Give us your loans. We'll consolidate them at the same rate as your mortgage loan.
Really?
Yes. Get 30 years to repay your mortgage and 180 months to repay the consolidated debt. It's simple. Visit or contact any of our 7 branch locations today.
in collaboration with Sorrel Consulting Limited, Black Island Girl Multimedia, and 365 MMP. Now here's your host, Alistair Grell.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph, for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here today.
You have been with physical planning for about a year now. Tell us about your role at physical planning.
I am the chief physical planner, so I manage the physical planning division, and that comes with a lot of responsibility. So really, as a chief physical planner, I have the mandate for ensuring that the division's role in managing the orderly development of Dominica is carried out.
Wow. Quite an extensive role. And how does that interrelate to the role of the department, physical planning?
So the division is legally mandated to permit developments in Dominica. So we have a national land use policy and a national physical development plan. So it is the responsibility of the physical planning division to ensure that developments on our island are occurring in accordance with those plans and with those policies and with the Physical Planning Act 2002.
Okay. There's a growing concern by many people out there that once they drop their plans at physical planning, it takes some time for physical planning to respond. How long is the process?
Well, according to the Physical Planning Act 2002, the physical planning process should take 120 days for a completed application. And I stress the term completed, because typically when we have applications dropped off at physical planning, what we do is we send notices out to the developer, the applicant, to complete their development application. So whenever we spot that there is something absent from the plans, there's a discrepancy or something missing, it means that the application, as defined by the law, is not yet complete. So we send these notices out to notify the applicant that they need to complete the application. Now, once we've received the application, a resubmission as we call it, and it is now complete, then we can consider it, and we have 120 days according to the Act, which is 4 months, to make a decision on the application.
So in instances, why would it take longer than the stipulated 120 days?
Well, it can take longer from submission to decision than 120 days. Because, of course, there are certain things that happen in the process of preparing a plan that are outside the control of the division. For one, when we send out for amendments, that is the notice to complete development application, we are not in control of how long the draftsperson or the architect will take to resubmit those plans. We are not in control of how long an engineer will take to review structural aspects of the plan. And also, as part of the physical planning process, there is a referral to external agencies that has to happen. So for instance, we refer our plans to the Environmental Health Department, Fire Services, and depending on various conditions on site, we might have to have a land use review, or we may even have to refer to Dominica or DOASCO for advice on their utilities in the area. So all of these things add to the length of time that it can take to process an application. And then once all of these processes have been complete, then it goes before one of two committees. So you either have the Technical Staff Committee or you have the Technical Advisory Committee. And the decision to put it before either committee depends on the complexity of the plan and the development. So if it's something that is straightforward, a domestic building, for instance, it will go to the Technical Staff Committee. If it's more complex, it requires an engineer's review. It's a commercial building, for example, it will go to the Technical Advisory Committee.
And the time, the allotted 120 days, is there any distinction between type of application, whether it's residential or commercial, or all fall under that?
Yes, so that is, so the Act itself does not make a distinction between the type of application.
Right.
It says that from the time an application is received, a completed application, there is a time period stipulated, a maximum of 120 days that is allowed for a decision.
Okay. Is there anything your department is doing to make the process as efficient as possible? And
yes.
if so, what
Yes.
are those?
There are quite a few things that we are doing as a department. So the first thing that we have done is we've recognized that we had a human resource constraint. So in the past, we've had 5 development control officers and 1 senior development control officer responsible for all developments on the island. And very recently, under the World Bank Housing Recovery Project, we've undergone an expansion of physical planning services. So what we've done is we've set up a series of satellite offices around Dominica. So these are located in Bellevue-Chopin, also in Maho, the Kalinago territory, and we also have one of these offices in Portsmouth. And so the intention is that we have new human resource to increase the speed at which we review these applications and also provide localized physical planning services in each of these districts. So this is one of the things that we have decided to do as a division to increase the speed by which we review applications. Another thing that we are looking at is we are looking at digitizing our processes. So this is something that we've conceptualized. We have been in discussions with various funding agencies to fund the process. But we recognize that with COVID-19 and the constraints of having to review paper-based applications, it is something that we should do. The time is right for us to move into the digital age and to have our services digitalized so that our applications can be submitted online.
Okay. Are there any legal limitations during the process as it relates to either location or the actual building of the structure for an applicant?
Yes, there are some legal limitations. So the first thing that we check is we ensure that the applicant has property rights. So that is a very important component of applying for physical planning permission. You have to have the right to develop a property. And for you to have that right, it either means that you have ownership of the property, and that is conferred through the certificate of title, or you have the property rights granted to you to develop the property by the owner, the legal owner of the property. So what we ask is that applicants can have to provide a notarized letter from the lawful landowner if they are not the landowner when they choose to develop a property and they apply for physical planning permission.
You mentioned earlier about the resiliency and Dominica's recovery. Recently, we have had a number of natural disasters which have affected the landscape. Erica in 2015, Maria in 2017. How have these experiences changed or reformed the building code that you have spoken about?
So it is precisely because of those experiences that we are trying to implement that building code. So after Hurricane Maria, it was recognized that we needed to make the building code part of our physical planning regulations, and for this reason, Cabinet approved the implementation of the building code. So we are now in the process where we want to engage stakeholders and we want to have sensitization so that people understand what the implications of the building code are. Because the building code itself speaks to resilient construction, it speaks to building back stronger. And what has happened at physical planning is that our Commonwealth of Dominica housing standards, these have been upgraded to reflect the lessons that we have learned from the experiences of both Erica and Maria. So for instance, people who apply to us realize that we are asking for better specifications in building materials. Galvanized sheeting, for instance, gauge 24, nothing higher than gauge 24. We're asking for bigger members in roof framing. We're asking for hurricane ties on every rafter. So all of these are lessons that we have translated into new standards at physical planning.
And how do you think this has affected the building process? Because clearly by asking the average consumer to do more means that you're elevating the cost of construction. How has these changes been received?
Well, we do recognize that anytime you're looking at increasing the specifications and you're looking at asking for bigger members in roofs and so on, this is going to increase the cost of construction. But what we tell our applicants and what we tell people who are prospective homeowners is that what you want is you want to spend money on your home upfront. Your home is an investment. You're going to be living in there for your natural life. You're going to be paying a mortgage to the bank for upwards of 30 years even. So what you want is that you do not want every natural disaster to have you to start all over again from square one. So by building resilient, by building using better materials, using better standards to build your building, what you have is that a home that is resilient to natural hazards so that you do not find yourself having to start the process of building all over again every time there is a natural disaster. So it's an investment upfront to save you money in the long term.
Insite is sponsored by
For an applicant that has all their documentation in place based on your requirements, how long does the process take?
Okay, so if we have an application where the land documents are in order, the plans are in order, all the structural details are in order, and we have no need to send out for amendments, that is the notice to complete development application, such a plan would take on average of 6 weeks to get the decision.
Okay. Physical planning falls under the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Planning, Resilience, Sustainable Development. How does your division work in promoting matters of the economy, particularly as it relates to average consumers who are looking to build a home?
Well, we work very closely with the ministry, as I call it, the Ministry of Planning and Economic Affairs. That's the shortened form that I use to call the ministry. We work closely with the ministry because we recognize that planning in itself for Dominica is not just the physical aspect. It has to relate to the economy, the social aspects, the environment, and of course, sustainability. So we, as a division, our role is really to look at the physical development of our built environment. So what we look at is not just buildings, but we also look at subdivisions. So we look at the most appropriate land spaces for various types of development, be it agricultural, commercial, residential, and so on. So all of these things, all of these types of decisions feed into sound economic decisions for Dominica. So we do play a role in ensuring that we are moving forward economically as a nation.
So how does physical planning and the Ministry of Economic Affairs work together, particularly in reference to the average applicant who is building his or her home and has limited resources?
Well, we do work together very closely. So we at Physical Planning, we do collect data in our application process, which is used to inform government policy as it relates to planning, construction, and building. So we recognize that during this pandemic, construction workers have been considered as essential workers, so to speak, because we recognize from physical planning data that this industry is very important to our economy. So this is how physical planning feeds into economic decision making and planning as a line ministry decision making process. And one of the initiatives of the government is to provide a subvention for first-time homeowners to the tune of $10,000. So physical planning works together with the government to determine that people who are receiving this subvention have approved plans, and the plans have been done to a specific standard to make sure that the money is put to good use towards the building of a resilient home.
Some essential food items like sugar, flour are commodities were price controlled by government. On the issue of building materials, cement is also regulated by government. Are there other building materials that you think should be regulated?
Well, in an ideal world, I think that regulation might be quite good for the construction industry in terms of keeping the price down for the average homeowner, for builders, and so on. But unfortunately, we are in an economic system where we import these materials into Dominica. And the market forces, and we also have other forces having to do with the manufacturing and sourcing of the raw materials related to producing these items. So these are things that we cannot control. So if we were to impose price control on something, say for example steel, that is, production of steel depends on so many factors. The oil industry for transportation, for the sintering process and all of that. So these are things that we cannot necessarily regulate in Dominica because the market forces, external market forces, control the prices of those things. I would say it would be ideal to have a certain variation, a price range through which it can vary. But again, things can be quite volatile. So in the case of cement, I think this is one particular material that we can certainly regulate, aggregates as well, because most of these aggregates and raw materials for construction are coming from Dominica. So these are things that we can consider regulation of prices for.
What can I do to make the process easier, shorter?
So I get that question quite frequently about shortening the time for the application process. And I can say that as an applicant, there are several things that you can do to shorten the time that it takes for us to arrive at a decision on your application. First things first, you must make sure that your property rights are in order. So in Dominica, we do have circumstances where people reside on a lot and they have not obtained their certificate of title, even if they have property rights for that land. So I'm saying that you need to ensure that this process is done well in advance of your application. Another thing that an applicant can do is ensure that their plans are being prepared by a competent professional who is very thorough, who pays attention to detail so that all the relevant information is submitted to physical planning. So that's quite important in the process. And something that I also tell people to do is when you're purchasing land that you wish to develop, check to make sure that this land belongs to an approved subdivision, approved by the Physical Planning Division, because the subdivision approvals process is a precursor to the building permitting process. And we do not permit buildings that are going to be constructed on unapproved subdivisions, because the idea is that through the approvals process for the subdivision, we can ensure that the subdivision has all the infrastructure necessary, the roads, electricity, the water, that the various hazards and land use constraints that happen around the land have been taken into account in the division of the plots. So we ask people to make sure that your land belongs to an approved subdivision.
Tell us more about the subdivisions.
Okay, so subdivisions really are when you have a larger parcel of land and you want to subdivide it into smaller plots for sale. So we have different types of subdivisions: agricultural for agricultural use, we have subdivisions for residential use, and those for industrial and commercial use. So we ask that whenever we receive a plan for a development on a specific plot of land, that land must belong to an approved subdivision. And the reason we ask for that is because by applying for subdivision approval at physical planning, we take into account the infrastructure that is required for the subdivision, the utilities as well, and we also look at the natural hazards that the land might be susceptible to and what mitigation measures might be needed. So all of these things are considered when we approve subdivision. So in a way, it is a precursor to the building process that ensures that your lot is in a safe zone. So we ask people to make sure that they have an approved subdivision.
Can you think of anything else that people really would like to know about the application process, or anything that you are doing at physical planning?
Well, what I would say is that at physical planning, our role really is to assist people with their development, because we recognize that a lot of people who are applying, they are lay people, they don't necessarily understand how structures work, how they resist wind and earthquakes. So we are there to ensure that the process, the technical process, is well taken care of in your design. So we ask people, members of the public who are interested in applying for planning permission, do not see the process as a hindrance. See it as a sort of audit to your plans for that home, that dream home that you want. So through going through the planning process, what you're doing is you're subjecting your plans to a review that ensures that they have taken into account all necessary structural requirements and architectural requirements to give you a comfortable home, a resilient home. So we want people to take advantage, actually see the process as something that is available to them to ensure that their home is what they need and what they want.
And I think that is an important point, because it suggests that the process is a constructive process rather than a destructive process.
Yes, it is.
Because many people, I believe, think that physical planning is there to stop or slow down, and it's not in favor of development. And I think that point really informs that. So I think that is very good for people to know. Anything else you think that would be of interest to an applicant?
Well, I'm quite happy to hear you say that it's a constructive process. I mean, I do recognize that we do have certain things at physical planning that we can improve on in terms of the time for the application and processing. But we want people by and large to understand that we have an important role to play, because this island that we call home, we have constrained land space by virtue of being the nature island of the Caribbean and our topography. So what we want is to develop the available land that we have in a very orderly way. So by everybody having some buy-in into the physical planning process and recognizing that we want to preserve our resources for future generations, then we can have a Dominica that is developed in a way that is more equitable, in a way that looks like what we want to see our island look like in future for our current generations and our future generations.
Insite is sponsored by in collaboration with Sorrel Consulting Limited, Black Island Girl Multimedia, and 365 MMP. Thank you for viewing Insite.
Dr. Joseph, thank you very much for being here today. It has been very informative, instructive, and I think everyone will be able to take something positive out of what you have said today.
Thank you again for inviting me. I'm quite pleased that I was able to elucidate the work of the department on your program today. Thank you.